Hi. So when John, which is also one of my favorite people in the world, invited me to talk about purpose, I thought about what would be my most authentic story to share with you today. So what I'm going to share with you today is the most authentic version I have to offer you right now about connection to purpose. So I remember the day I experienced my first real orgasm. I was 26 years old. I was in my bed in the afternoon, and the room I was in was literally spinning. I burst out in uncontrollable laughter and feeling deep sensations that I have never felt before. Suddenly, my partner asks me, "Why are you hiding your face with your hands?" I didn't even know I was covering my face with my hands. Like this, I was hiding. I was embarrassed. "Open your hands," he encouraged me. "Celebrate your pleasure." And for the first time, I did. This was the first time I said yes to my sexuality. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of our yes and our no, and how accessing our sexuality as women elevates our power in our personal and our professional relationships. I'm going to share with you the lessons learned from working in the last 4 years with more than 400 women across the world, including executives from the biggest tech companies, successful entrepreneurs, and underprivileged women. And it all started from my own personal journey. It was a very long journey for me to have a positive sexual experience. At the age of 10, a stranger exposed himself on the street. At 15, in a summer job, my 45 years old boss would randomly hold my ass firmly with his 2 hands until I would move. And in my 20s, in my first startup, a client casually put his hand on my leg. When I was younger, being sexual didn't feel safe, so somewhere in my adolescence, I decided to put out my sexuality and focus on protecting myself. That day of my first orgasm was the first time I could embrace my sexuality. The pleasure I felt was so deep that when it was over, for hours I was walking with rooted confidence and power. The whole day I could not stop smiling. I remember myself standing in the grocery line, realizing I am inappropriately smiling. People told me, "You're shining, you look great," and this feeling lasted for more than 24 hours. The day after at work, I was productive like never before. It was the best version of myself. I remember thinking, if being sexual has so much benefit to life, how come nobody is teaching us how to use it? I never received tools to access my sexuality, and after I went through this experience, I decided to become sexually educated. I needed to start somewhere, so naturally, I went to my good friend, Google. I remember myself Googling how to be sexual, how to access the power of my sexuality, and even how to stop freezing in sexual interactions. And to my surprise, the first place I ended up starting with was Tantra. When I told my friends I'm going to a Tantra workshop, they were like, "Oh wow, have fun. We know what Tantra is. We saw the videos of all the postures online." But our workshop was nothing like that. It was mainly about emotional relations, about consent, and about boundaries. And there I learned 3 main principles that completely transformed my life and also directed my work, which I'm going to share with you today. The first one talks about the importance of saying no. And this goes beyond just the bedroom. It's saying no to anything that doesn't serve us in life. Our teacher there said something that stayed with me. She said, "A person that doesn't have a no doesn't have a yes." If we keep compromising in our lives, we can't recognize our yes. And also technically, if we don't let go of the things we don't want, we don't have time left on the calendar for our yes. And this is beyond, like it's all the domains in our lives. That time, I was leading a startup I co-founded, and most of my challenges were in the boardroom. Being the least experienced person in the room, I was hardly speaking in our board meetings because I was so scared to just say the wrong thing. So after the workshop, I decided to practice my no exactly there, where it was harder for me. In the beginning, I was scared. I started by saying no to someone who called my comment fluffy. It felt good. So then it became a habit. Every time I recognized something that was wrong, I said no to it out loud. No, I don't think we should close this deal. It's wrong for us. Or, no, I'm not going to go on this last-minute business trip to meet an investor that I know we shouldn't close with. And more and more. And as my confidence grew and I had more space, I could start leaning into my yes. And in Tantra, I learned the principles of my hell yes. There is a saying we go through in the workshop that says, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. And what it means is that for making any decision in life, we need to get a yes on 3 levels: our mind, our heart, and our body. Asking the mind, what do you think you should do? Asking the heart, what do you feel you should do? And what does your body tell you about the options? From the moment I was presented with this concept of my hell yes and learned to listen to my body, most of the mind rambling I used to have in decision making was gone. And there I could discover my authority, and I was no longer asking my co-founder or my board members to make the financial decisions in our business for me. It also elevated my standards for what I say yes to. I used to sit hours and hours in the most boring meetings that I knew had no benefit for my business. And after that, no more. But the most important principle I learned through Tantra, the one that allowed me to own my yes and my no, was learning to identify and communicate my own boundaries. There is one particular exercise I remember. I'm standing in one side of the room, and my partner stands 5 meters away from me in the other side. Following my sign, and only with my permission, was he allowed to either take a step closer to me, or go further away from me, or stop where you are, this feels okay. This seemingly trivial exercise was incredibly powerful for me. I heard a lot during my life about sexual misconduct, but this was the first time I was introduced to sexual conduct. I felt like I received a secret weapon, a golden piece of knowledge that allows me, as a woman being, to walk with power in the world, and I felt it the strongest in the workplace. Before that, when someone would talk too close to me, like face to face, in a way that would make me smell his breath, I used to force myself to continue and concentrate on what he has to say and hope this nightmare is going to end soon. After the workshop, it became, sorry, can you take a step back? Or in a meeting, when someone would casually put his hand on my leg, I used to freeze, or at my best, try to move politely. And after the workshop, it became, why are you touching my leg with your hand? Take your hand off me, asshole. The more I was sexually educated, pursuing these courses and learning the subtle energy of sexuality, what it has to offer, its shadows, the sensitivity it requires, the more my jaw dropped. How come we don't learn it in school? How come it is not addressed in the workplace? No wonder we are freezing, living in fear, finding it challenging to assess even our own boundaries or communicate them. We are ignorant, avoiding to become educated on the strongest energy that leads our life. And I decided to do something about it. I wanted to give more people, but especially women, the tools of learning their yes and their no in a way that can influence their professional relationships. That time, I was facilitating an entrepreneurship workshop for women professionals across the world. And then in addition to the classic things we covered, like writing your business plan or creating your pitch, our team added to our workshop something that we called the Red Tent, named after what's believed to be an ancient tradition for women gatherings. Only our version of a red tent was allowing women to access their sexuality and learn about their yes and their no. After we introduced it, something happened that surprised many, but not me. The women in our workshops rated, and constantly are rating, the red tent as the most valuable part in our workshop. and they share how much it surprises them, the empowerment they get and motivation to pursue their work. When we started to introduce the red tent in our workshop, our team knew something very clearly. When introducing sexuality teachings to women, we need to do it carefully and gently. Many women that attend our workshop, before they came, have been through an experience in which they had to leave a workplace because of sexual harassments and gender discrimination. When you see the statistics of sexual harassments in the workplace, it's really easy to understand why so many women are finding it like they're scared to explore or even just talk about their sexual fire in public. It could be dangerous. It is not easy for me to stand on this stage and lead this conversation. But I decided to stand up for this fire because I know that it's time now that as women we lead this way. And it all starts with our ability to recognize and communicate our yes and no. And it's not so simple as it sounds. In one of our workshops, we shared the exercise of allowing the women to get to know their no. So they had to walk in the room and make random requests of each other. And no matter what they request, they had to say no. So these requests could be, can we have a meeting tomorrow? Or could you help me prepare this presentation? And again, no matter what they ask, you just say no and examine how it feels. Jess, a 36 years old business owner from Germany, started crying in the middle of this exercise. Later she told me, I was never taught that I'm even allowed to say no. And now I understand what a huge cost it has on my personal and my professional life. But it's not only the no we are challenged with, it is also the yes. One of the things that surprised me is how many of us are completely speechless when asked a simple question. What do you want? We work a lot with underprivileged women, and I will never forget Aliza. 24 years old, somewhere in her teenage years, started cleaning houses, earning minimum wage so she can support her 7 siblings and help cover her family's debt. When we went through in the workshop the part of connecting to our hell yes, Aliza was pretty speechless. She said, no one ever asked me these questions. What do you want? What are you saying yes to? When you grow up in a reality that doesn't work for you on so many levels, it is really hard to start visualizing a reality that does. We tend to take some things as facts that are unchangeable. The workshop helped Aliza to connect with the energy of her hell yes. And finally, she said it out loud. I want to be a doctor. That's what I always wanted. She came back to her reality, determined and empowered. And last year I spoke with her and she shared that she's currently pursuing her pre-med school. We're living now in a very exciting time in the world. Women are collectively saying what we no longer accept with our body, with our compensation, with our rights. We clearly say no, no more. But owning our no and our boundaries is just the first step of unleashing our power as women. In addition to what we do not want, we should simultaneously educate ourselves what we do want. Life is meant to be pleasurable and fulfilling. We're not here only to survive, as we will finally not be harassed. We are here to thrive, to own our pleasure in our personal life, to take a leading role on guiding men on how to behave with a woman's body and with our needs, to follow our curiosity, to express our ideas, so that while we support all the women that are currently sexually exploited in the world by the important movements like Time's Up, we're also building a world in which we are no longer the victims, a world in which we lead. And I can share that I have seen that when women start owning their yes and their no in their personal lives, they start owning it in their professional lives as well, demanding equal pay, taking part in decision-making, shaping the workplace to fit their needs, and directing the public conversation. And men, I know I'm mainly talking about women, but this also goes to your daughters, sisters, and spouses. So what can we do? So first, men and women leading businesses, shaping the workplace. It's time we give our employees tools to communicate their yes and no. So while onboarding employees, consider to include some exercises from the world of sexual conduct, teaching employees to own their boundaries and to develop healthy dialogues on the topic. And women, as we now experience this revolution of finally saying our no, let's just make sure we don't skip our yes in all realms. Our ideas, our money, our body, our life. It has been absent for so long. We're building a world now in which our yes is welcomed, our power, our pleasure, our hell yes. Thank you very much.